Hello, everyone. My name is LJ Stambuk. I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte, and I'm delighted today to have with us Ambassador Bárcena from Mexico. It is a great honor. And by the way, we have a record number of attendees today registered. Thank you all for joining us today. I would like to use this opportunity also to thank the board members of the World Affairs Council joining us and the former board members of the World Affairs Council joining us. I would also like to, a special surprise, Your Excellency, we have with us Mr. Zoran Kerneta, who is the sporting director of the new Charlotte Football Club. We have a new football club in Charlotte. It's going to start playing in 2021. We're very, very excited about that. And he has asked me, and they have asked me to invite you, Your Excellency, to come to the first game when they open the season in 2021 as their guests. So you have an invitation from the Charlotte Football Club, and we would love to see you in Charlotte. This program, this event is sponsored by the Consulate General of Mexico in Raleigh and the Honorary Consulate of Mexico. Thank you so very much. As the community's premier global education, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, the World Affairs Council of Charlotte has always sought to bring the world closer to you and to build a community of internationally informed and engaged citizens. Dialogue, knowledge, active participation, and an understanding of global issues are vitally important for our democracy to flourish at all levels. We have a lot of students with us today, and I would just like to call out all the schools that are here with us today. Cannon School, Charlotte Country Day School, Charlotte Latin, Providence Day School, Rowan Salisbury Schools, and Union County Public Schools. Colleges and universities joining us today: Davidson College, Georgia State University, Pfeiffer University, Queens University, UNC Charlotte, University of California, Los Angeles, Wake Forest, and Wingate University. A little bit of housekeeping details. Your microphone will be on mute and your camera turned off for the duration of the presentation. To submit a question at any time, and we do want you to have questions and pose them for Ambassador Bárcena, please use the question and answer box in the Zoom toolbar. You can see it circled in red in front of you. And finally, this presentation will be recorded and we will send it to all of you, share it with all of you. And please make sure that you have the correct email when you sign up with the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. If you enjoyed this free program, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to help support our international education mission. If you're not a member, please consider becoming and support the World Affairs Council. We appreciate that very much. We are on social media, so you can share and follow us there as well. It's my pleasure to greet here today and welcome Claudia Velasco Osorio, the Consul General of Mexico in Raleigh, North Carolina. And thank you for sponsoring this event. We appreciate that very, very much. It is my pleasure now to introduce to you the Honorable Wayne Cooper, who is the Honorary Consul of Mexico to Charlotte and North Carolina for the past 39 years. He's going to celebrate his 40th year as Honorary Consul of Mexico in March. And by chance, Wayne Cooper is also the chairman of the board of the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. Wayne Cooper.
Thank you. Before I turn it over, I'd like to give a moment for the Consul General to say something. Is she on? Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Starbucks. First, I want to congratulate the World Affairs Council of Charlotte for the great job that they are doing in these difficult times in order to keep us informed in different issues. It's a pleasure to have this morning our Ambassador, Marta Bárcena Coqui. Thank you, Ambassador, for dedicated space in your busy schedule for having this virtual presentation. We are excited to hear you in a topic that interests all us.
Thank you so very much, Consul General. And again, we're so delighted to have Ambassador Bárcena. She and I met last November in Washington, D.C. pre-COVID. We shared the table, sat next to each other, agreed to this event. And it is such a pleasure to meet you then, and it's such a pleasure to have you now. Wayne Cooper.
Thank you so much, LJ, and Madam Ambassador and Madam Consul General and fellow consuls and honorary consuls. Yeah, it really is an honor to introduce the ambassador today. And in coming up on 40 years or 39 years, we've had the privilege of hosting, I think, every single ambassador here in North Carolina. This is the first time that we've done it virtually over the internet. But Ambassador Bárcena has a very impressive bio that was included in everyone's invitation to today's event. I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights so we don't take time away from her presentation. Yeah, I heard the ambassador a few weeks ago give a presentation to the National District Export Council in Washington. The feedback was really, really incredible. Everybody was blown away with her knowledge and grasp of trade issues and trade agreements. And I mentioned to one guy, I said, you know, she led the renegotiation of NAFTA and laid the foundation for the recently signed USMCA, United States, Mexico, and Canada free trade agreement. Ambassador Bárcena was appointed by President Obrador in 2018. I think the first woman to ever hold that position. She holds 2 master's degrees, speaks English, French, Italian, Spanish, with a knowledge of German, Danish, and Chinese. Not easy languages. She's a career diplomat, as was her husband before he recently retired. She was ambassador to almost everywhere: Denmark, Norway, Iceland, Turkey, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, as well as holding almost every position you think in the diplomatic corps. Yeah, as I was putting my remarks together for the day, and I asked Consul General Velasquez, what does the ambassador, what are her other interests besides diplomacy? I found out she's a ballet dancer, or was a ballet dancer with the National Dance Company. She's a big fan of regional music of Veracruz, as it brings back many beautiful memories of her birthplace. And you know, Madam Ambassador, I have to confess, I've got great memories of sitting on the Zocalo, having food and listening to beautiful Veracruz music and food. She owns an extensive collection of traditional Mexican clothing from all the states in Mexico, which she proudly wears during our National Day celebration. And as ambassador to the United States, she is given priority to highlight the contributions of the Mexican communities in the U.S. And I always think of our wonderful DACA students who have done so much to build both countries. And lastly, and I think the most important thing, she loves to share photos of her 1-year-old granddaughter, Sophia, who lives in Dubai. Now, that's got to be a story on its own. Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorary Consul. Thank you. So I'm really, really honored to be here today with you, with the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. I had the privilege, as Mr. Stambuk said, Lee J, that of sharing the table last year in the World Affairs Council meeting in Washington. And I have been willing to go to Charlotte, but then COVID got into my way of visiting North Carolina and Charlotte. I am really honored of the presentation that our Honorary Consul of Mexico, Mr. Wayne Cooper, made of me. I think he got it all right. And I like especially the way that he went into what are my hobbies, my fascinations, and it's true. Now, the thing that makes me most happy in these difficult times is just seeing my granddaughter, Sophia, who lives in Dubai, because my eldest daughter works and lives there since 5 years ago. So we are an international family, having been both me and my husband career diplomats. We have been around the world. We have been posted to mostly Europe and Asia, but we have worked in North American affairs for many years. So I would say that I'm really honored to be now the first female ambassador to the US. I'm very honored that we have several female consuls, including our great Consul General in Raleigh, Claudia Velasco. I think that we are working at our full capacity in benefit of the bilateral relationships, and to really highlight what the honorary consul said, to highlight the incredible contributions of Mexicans to the US in the past, in the present, and in the future. And I will start with this overview, saying that once I was in a lunch with former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and she was asked by other people at the lunch how did she dealt with Russia and with the issue of Kosovo and Bosnia and the Balkans and China. But then someone who was not me asked her which was the most complex relationship for the US and the most fundamental for the future. And she said, well, the most complex relationship for the US is the relationship with Mexico. And it is the most fundamental for the future. And for one very simple reasons, we share a border that is more than 2,000 miles. And we have a growing Mexican population in the US, or of Mexican origin. It's around between 36 and 38 million of people of Mexican origin in the US, which makes 60% of the Latinx or Hispanic population in the US. And some of them are undocumented, around 5 million. And some of them are DACAs that Honorary Consul underlined so well, how the DACAs are really a great group that we have to take care of. And another thing that it makes the relationship between Mexico and the US very different from other ones. And is that it is not a traditional, sometimes foreign affairs relationship, but it's more dealing with domestic issues. For many of you that are students of international relations or economy, and this is what it is called sometimes intermestic issues. So the policies of migration affects that are taken by the US affect Mexico very much, and vice versa. So what we have to look now is what does it brings this relationship for the future? And I want to say first that this relationship for the future is based on cities like Charlotte, on states like North Carolina. Because even after being hard hit by the pandemic, Charlotte is a bright example of a business-oriented, competitive region that has increased its relationship with Mexico. North Carolina is a hub of innovation. It's a relative cost of doing business. It has infrastructure advantages, and it resembles Charlotte as several cities in Mexico, and the state of North Carolina reminds me in a way, with all the statistics, to some states in the Bajío region in Mexico. And there are regions like North Carolina and the Bajío regions that have been transformed as a result of our North American economic region expansion. So North Carolina is also has been a magnet of attraction because of the incredible universities and business schools that are located there. And that is why we've been so interested from Mexico to strengthening our contacts with North Carolina. I recently was with Duke Center for International Global Studies, also giving a lecture or a conference, a conversation. Now, having said that, all the comparisons, the similarities between North Carolina and certain parts of Mexico on how we benefited from NAFTA and now USMCA, what it's that we have in front of us? The upcoming elections in the US will mark the beginning of a new cycle for both countries. Why I am saying this? Because when President López Obrador won the election in 2018, that meant that his first 2 years of government were coincidental with the last 2 years of the first of the term of President Donald Trump. Now, we will know maybe next week who will be the next president of the United States, either the re-election of President Trump or the election of Vice President Biden. And that means that both presidents, President López Obrador and the next president of the United States, will coincide for the next 4 years with the same tenure. And these 4 years will be fundamental to see how we are going to develop this relationship in the next 20 years. Why do we have some fundamental, first, what I want to say is that the government of Mexico will work with whoever leads the government of the United States after election. Why? Because we don't intervene in internal affairs of the US. And second, because our interests are permanent. The interests of Mexico are permanent. The interests of the United States are permanent. And we have to work hard to build on the goodwill and the cooperation on these bilateral relationships. There are issues like trade, investment, migration, security, respect for environment that transcend individual administrations. And even if the focus on these specific matters can change and evolve, they will always be there, and we will always have to cooperate and to exchange information on these areas. And then we will have to adapt ourselves to several changing trends at the global level. One very immediate is the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing economic crisis that has derived from this pandemic. And that pandemic has made our close cooperation between our two countries as necessary as ever. So we have to work on how are we going, for example, to continue to do testing. How are we going to deal with vaccines? We have been working very closely with laboratories in the US, with the US government to have access to vaccines, both, of course, in the US and in Mexico. And we will continue to work on this COVID-19. The other very important area in which is now the legal framework for our future relationship in trade and investment, it's the entry into force of USMCA. Entry into force of the USMCA has been one of the landmarks of the year 2020. And it will be fundamental for the future of the economies of Mexico, the US, North Carolina, and Charlotte. And why it is important, USMCA? Because USMCA represents a template for what the new agreements on free trade will look in the future. Because it includes chapters that were not included in NAFTA, like chapters on labor rights, on environmental protection, chapters on small and medium enterprises, on gender issues, on a better dispute settlement mechanisms, chapters in areas that 24 years ago when NAFTA entered into force did not exist or exist in a very small amount, like digital trade. So we have now a template for our future relationships, and we have to take the most advantage of it. We are working hard in the implementation process, establishing the Secretariat for the Free Trade Agreement for USMCA, and establishing all the committees and all the different consultation processes that are included in the USMCA. At the same time, Mexico has embarked itself in a very, very ambitious labor reform, and we are implementing it according to the schedule that we planned, and that we exchange information about this schedule and the resources that we are allocating for the labor reform with the US Congress. And we are also upgrading all our commitments in environment. And how are we seeing that this USMCA will increase on our trade with the US in general and with North Carolina in particular? With the US in general, Mexico this year, 2020, and even in 2019, became the first trading partner of the US, with a trade of $614 billion dollars in the year 2019. That means we expect with USMCA and even with COVID that this trade exchange will continue to grow. And the more it grows, the more challenges we will have, because the more successful we are in certain areas, for example, in Mexico's exports of fruits and vegetables to the US, also there will be more competition with the states in the US that produce those fruits and vegetables. That is an example. So what we have seen is that in the case of North Carolina and Mexico, in the last 10 years, trade between North Carolina and Mexico has grown at 96% at an annual average rate of 7%. That means very much above the economic growth of North Carolina or of Mexico. In 2019, North Carolina's exports to Mexico accounted for almost $4 billion and supported regional supply chains specialized in chemical, automotive, and machinery sectors in Mexico. In 2019, North Carolina imports from Mexico accounted to $8 billion and supported regional supply chains specialized in automotive, electronic, and chemical sectors. Total trade between North Carolina and Mexico, which is $11.6 billion in 2019, for you to compare, is greater than US total trade with Denmark and Iceland. So that means that just the trade of Mexico with each state of the US can be most of the times bigger than the total trade of the US with other countries. Mexico is North Carolina's second largest trading partner, its second largest export destination after Canada, and its second largest import partner. Even more, several Mexican companies, including Bimbo, that is the owner also of Sara Lee, and Entemax, Cemex, Gruma, Alfa, USA, Sigma, have established themselves in North Carolina and support almost 4,000 good-paying jobs for North Carolinians. And overall, around 150,000 jobs in North Carolina are supported by trade in Mexico. So we have, in the last 10 years, strengthened our value chains. How are we going to even increase those relationships in the future? Basically, I think with taking into account two elements. First, USMCA, and particularly the new rules of origin in the auto sector that are designed in USMCA to attract more investment to the North American region. You know, in NAFTA, the rules of origin in the auto sector asks us for 62.5 regional content, and now would be 75. So we will have to embark in a transformation of the automotive sector and to increase the regional content, and that will make the North American region even more stronger than before. Second, we will be strengthening also other areas like agri-food security, like chemical sectors and electronics. And the USMCA gives us the framework for this. But what is more relevant is that with COVID-19, we saw the weaknesses also of our North American region. When COVID-19 exploded and disseminated and the lockdowns came, then we realized that in several sectors, the North American region was too dependent on other regions, particularly too dependent from Asia. And even though we had a lot of challenges in harmonizing what we call essential sectors to keep them open during the pandemic, at the end, both Mexico and Canada harmonized its essential sectors list with the US. And that meant that not even one factory in the US closed because they did not have supplies from Mexico. They always had the supplies they needed from Mexico or Canada. That did not happen when the supplies were coming from Asia or Europe to certain US factories. And second, we understood better than ever how deeply interconnected and interdependent we were when we realized that, for example, companies as Boeing had more than 56 suppliers in 26 states of Mexico. So what is the lessons that we learned from that? That we can rely on each other on the North American region, that we need to strengthen the North American region, and we need to depend less and less from other regions in many sectors, but we have to identify which sectors are the priority to strengthen the competitiveness of the North American region. And among those sectors is, of course, automotive, it's pharmaceutical, is manufacturing of PPE, protective personal equipment, medical equipment in general, electronics, which is key in the trade between Mexico and North Carolina, electronics and some other areas that we are working hard as aerospace. So we need to work on that. But that is the trade and investment, which is key for the future. But what is key also for the future, even more, according to my point of view, it's not only trade and investment, but it's the people-to-people relationship. Is the interaction among our people, is the respect that we have for each other. And in that sense, we need to work even much better to get to know each other. And why do I say this? Because I know that in this conversation, there are many students, and I would like to have more exchange students with Mexico, more Mexican students coming to the US, particularly to North Carolina, the students from North Carolina going to Mexico, working together in future projects, taking advantage of scholarships programs that are there, and getting to know the history of both countries better. For example, next year, we are going to celebrate, to commemorate the 700th anniversary, yes, of the establishment of Mexico City, Mexico Tenochtitlan. 500-year anniversary of the fall of Tenochtitlan, which really was the beginning of the colonial period, not only in Mexico, but in the whole American continent. And then we will commemorate 200 years of the end of our War of Independence from Spain. And so many Americans know that Mexico and the US have always been intertwined, also historically speaking. But some others do not know that next year commemoration of the 200 years of the ending of the independence movement in Mexico is also a commemoration for the US. Because when Mexico got independence from Spain, the Mexican borders in the north arrived to what today are the borders between California and Oregon, and Utah and Wyoming. And to the south, the Mexican border was what today is Colombia, Panama. So what happened is that in 1821, California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas became also independent from Spain. And for a while, and not a very long time, but they were part of Mexico. Then we have to acknowledge that common history, and we have to get to know better that common history and to build on that common history for the future. And that is something that will enrich all of us, and will enrich all of us if we know each other better and if we understand how the development of history has taken place. And also, if we understand how these exchanges have changed the face of both Mexico and the US. Mexico will not be what is today without the influence of the Mexicans working in the US, their remittances, their culture. Mexico will not be today what it is without the cultural influence of the US in areas like music, in areas like also food. It will not be the same without the presence of American companies in Mexico and their work spirit. But also the US will not be or is not what it is today without the presence of the Mexicans in the US, also influencing culture. You just have to remember the great work that the Mexican film directors do in Hollywood, but also in music, in food, and in the presence of these workers that during COVID have been at the forefront of the jobs in areas as agriculture, meatpacking, grocery stores, hospitals, all the so-called essential workers. Many of these essential workers that sometimes their essential rights have not been respected. And so we need to see a common vision for the future in Mexico, the US, and Canada. And what is that common vision? Is a region that understands each other better, a region that respects each other more, a region that is increasingly bilingual or trilingual with the use of English, Spanish, and French, to say the least. And I know that the US, there are many languages that are also spoken, and in Mexico also many languages basically of our original populations, and a region that can be more competitive in the world and that have a better quality of life for all our inhabitants. And we share common challenges for the future. We share the challenge of inequality that COVID had made very, very much put in the first place. We have huge challenges of inequality in Mexico. We have the challenge of social justice, and we have the challenge of how to build this future. And they were asking me in Utah that I have just returned, Ambassador, do you see something similar to what is now in the European Union, the Schengen area? That means the free movement of labor and people without visas. And I answer, yes, I see that as one vision that we may have for the future. It will not be immediate. We need to level first the playing field. We need not to have these economic gaps between the poorest regions in Mexico and between Mexico and the US and Canada, but we need to work on that. And the moment we have more and more similar economies and that we interact and complement each other, the stronger we will be as a region, the stronger we will be as countries, the stronger we will be as communities, and the richer we will be as persons. So I really encourage you, my consulate, to work with you all the time for this vision of a common future, of a prosperous future, of a future that is less unequal, more fairer, and with equal opportunity for all, equal opportunity before the law, equal economic opportunities, and then let's everybody thrive according to its capacities, to their will, and with respect to each other. And I'm really, really honored to be here and ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kent Walker. I'm a board member at the World Affairs Council of Charlotte and a partner at McGuire Woods. And I'm going to be fielding questions for the ambassador. So if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I'll receive it, and then we can work through those. Ambassador, the first question relates to travel restrictions under COVID. We've had a couple of questions about people who are interested in visiting your country on vacation, but are concerned about the ability to both get to Mexico and to return to the United States, and in particular, if they're symptomatic at all. Do you have any information about the current state of that?
Yes, of course, Kent. It's, I mean, there are travel restrictions, particularly at the land border. At the land border, there are restrictions that have been agreed by both countries in the sense that we are restricted that travel by land to essential activities. That means trade, some health activities, etc. Not for crossing for touristic activities. On the travels by plane, there are no restrictions for the moment, and I don't think there will be restrictions. So, for example, if you can travel by plane to Cancun, to Puerto Vallarta, to Los Cabos, and come back by plane to the US, you just have to check what are the requisites in each of your states. There are some states that are asking that when you come back from abroad, you keep a quarantine of 14 days. But this is a decision that is made at a state level in the US. So there are restrictions for land crossings, for land traveling, including restrictions for tourism, if you do it by land. Until now, there are no restrictions for traveling by plane to Mexican tourism destinations. And we haven't had any report that there have been any problems until now for tourists coming back from Mexico. And there are no restrictions to enter Mexico by plane.
Great, thank you very much. The next question relates to the comment you made about the 75% regional content and value add in connection with automotive parts or complete automobiles being duty-free. The question is whether the 75% regional content requirement is the same for other industries, or does it vary by industry? Are there similar content requirements for other industries?
No, the 75% content that I mentioned is for the automotive industry. And the rules of origin for the automotive industry are very detailed. It's not only the 75%, but it also has to have a minimum of content from core parts and from steel and aluminum. It's very technical, but we can go on working maybe in the future if you're interested on that, and a specific seminar with the Ministry of Economy. And other sectors do not have this requirement of 75% of content.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the state of the economy in Mexico currently. Do you have a view about the impact of COVID and also the pre-COVID and the projected economic trajectory of Mexico in a post-COVID world?
Yes. Before COVID, Mexico had been growing more or less at a media of 2% up to 3% a year, maximum 3%, 2%. And this is something that also I didn't mention in my talk, but I want to underline. NAFTA had been very good in general for the US and for Mexico, but not everybody was benefited by NAFTA. There were sectors and regions that were very badly affected by NAFTA. In the case of Mexico, for the small producers, small farm producers, and the south and southeast of Mexico did not incorporate to the benefits of NAFTA. In the US, of course, there was some sectors and some regions that really were, you can consider losers of globalization and NAFTA, like the Rust Belt or the Midwest. So what we saw in the economy of Mexico in the last years is that even with economic growth that was not as expected, there was a growing inequality. So To say it simply, the richer were getting richer and the middle class was growing, but there was still a very high percentage of very poor people in Mexico. So that means that we really have to adapt and see how to adapt the economic model to pay more attention to the most vulnerable ones and to give them this chance of equal economic opportunities and equality before the law, equality for access for education, etc. Normally, when there is a change of government in Mexico, the first year of the change of government, the economy in the last 3 or 4 change of government had not been doing very well. And that happened in 2019. The economy did not grow as expected. As a matter of fact, it basically stagnated on 0 growth. And then COVID came. And it's too soon to say what would be the impact, the final impact of COVID, but it really has been tremendous. And according to the World Bank and to the IMF expectations, maybe the Mexican economy will decrease in 9%. So we will lost a lot of really advancement that we have done in the previous years. That is why the Mexican government has emphasized all its activities to fight COVID-19 into the most vulnerable populations, with loans for small and medium enterprises and micro enterprises, with trying to cover a universal health care through a new mechanism of the National Institute of Health and Welfare, and trying to give some monthly resources to the most vulnerable groups, like the old age pension, all the old age pensioners, and a scholarship for students. Is that enough? Maybe not. But one decision that the government took was not to get more indebted, because even with that decision of not getting more indebted, Mexico's ratio of debt to GDP has grown from 40% to 50% approximately. Just for you to compare, the ratio of debt to GDP in the US is 100%. In some countries of Europe is 120%. So this, of course, has meant that Mexico has had to concentrate the scarce resources that it had to fight COVID in the most vulnerable populations. Having said that, the projections for 2021 is that the Mexican economy will grow again in between 3 to 4%. And these will not compensate for the loss of 2020, but it will have the basis for an ulterior growth. And let's hope that we can grow in the future at rates of between 4 to 6%, which is what we really need to have better results in the fight against poverty and inequality.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we spoke before the presentation began about Hurricane Zeta briefly, and our sympathies and thoughts and prayers of everyone here, I'm sure, with Mexico during the aftermath of that. Can you speak a little bit about the actual impact that the storm had on Mexico, and perhaps expand a bit on Mexico's view and policy on global warming generally?
Yes. First, Zeta passed basically near in between Cancun and Puerto Morelos, so the state of Quintana Roo was affected. I was receiving some information that some hotels and these had minor damages that they are already repairing, but it passed quite quickly. So fortunately, I think the damage was not as big as we could have feared before Zeta went through. So it really hit Quintana Roo, Yucatan, and the whole peninsula, but the rains lasted only a couple of days, and now Zeta is unfortunately in the Gulf of Mexico, directing itself to New Orleans, and it seems that it's gaining a strength again. And all the mechanisms that we have in Mexico to attend for natural disasters were put in place for CETA, and fortunately, I think that we will be able to recuperate, to bring back from the damages of CETA quite quickly. In the case of climate change, as you know, Mexico is part of the Paris Agreement, and we have submitted our national commitments to comply with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. And of course, climate change is an issue that worries Mexico quite a lot, because according to different studies, Mexico is one of the countries that would be more affected. Our cities by the seashore could have more floods than before. We could have longest periods of drought in the northern part of Mexico, as we have seen in the northern part of Mexico and the southern part of the US. In California, in Texas, droughts that have lasted for years. And so it is an area which I personally think we will need to work more closely in the future between Mexico and the US, and on all environmental cooperation, and also both in what we call in the climate change parlance, both adaptation measures and mitigation measures. We will need to work on both, and particularly put a lot of emphasis on adaptation.
Thank you. Turning back to the US elections, is there a particular view about the different ways that the Mexican government will interact with different possible administrations in the aftermath of next week's election?
Well, we interact in a very institutional and professional way. We have already been interacting with both Republicans and Democratic administrations for many years. And the basis of all interaction is mutual respect, tolerance, knowing that we are in the same boat together for the future. So as I said at the beginning of my talk, there are issues that will always be there in our agenda, in our bilateral agenda: trade, investment, migration, security, border infrastructure, environmental cooperation. It can change the emphasis of one issue or the other, depending on the government, and it can change also the specific situation. We did not, at the end of last year, we did not imagine that this year we will be basically occupying ourselves with COVID and trying to align the essential sectors and this. We were thinking on other matters, like, for example, how to really put all the effort in USMCA and in getting a lot of, presence in different states of the US, going to give conference seminars, and we have had to do it everything through Zoom or through internet. And next year, for example, after my conversations at Congress with both Republican and Democrats, I see that a special attention will be given in the US to immigration reform, including permanent legislation about the Dreamers that, by the way, it has already been passed by the House of Representatives. That, for example, if that happens, if the US Congress gives a special attention or priority to immigration, it is certain that both the Mexican embassy and all the 50 consulates in the US will be working very hard on immigration issues and how to convey the facts and realities of the benefits of immigrants to the US in the near future. But maybe we will continue to work more in the relocalization of value chains from Asia to the North American region. This is something that we will see, and we will wait for the results of the election for all, how the government will conform itself, the next government of the US. But the message, the clear message is that the Mexican government will work with respect, with mutual respect, with tolerance, with enthusiasm, with whomever leads the next US government. We are ready to work. We know that we are in this together. We know that the US is our most important partner. We would like the US to acknowledge that Mexico is its most important partner and it's its most important future. And we would like to work with that attitude of cooperation and respect.
Thank you. Turning quickly, one of our educator participants, Sylvia Samard-Newman, has asked if there's a specific website for teachers to go to in order to find names of Mexican schools to start pen pal exchanges and ultimately travel exchanges. And I think you mentioned scholarships, and she wants to know where those can be found.
I think you can contact us at the official website of the embassy, which I will ask now that they put in the chat, because we have a section just dedicated to issues of cooperation between Mexico and the US, and we have 2 persons dedicated totally to education exchanges. So they can put you in contact with different websites and with the schools to do this, and it will be a pleasure to do it. The persons in charge of this of these issues are Minister Marta Peña, First Secretary Mireya Dominguez, and Cecilia Bosch. And please contact the embassy. I'm asking them to put the website, and we can do this. And you can also work on these matters with our consulate in Raleigh, in North Carolina, and we will be in contact all the time to help for these exchanges.
Thank you again. Another of our attendees asks, how can we improve the conversation and create a more effective, actionable plan around immigration that would be beneficial for both Mexico and the United States?
I think the best improvement of conversation will be to organize these conversations or seminars to discuss the fact and realities of immigration. If you go and study, for example, the demographic profiles of the US and Mexico and other countries, then compare it to for example, what has happened in Europe, you will see that the US society has aged more slowly than the European ones, thanks to immigration. And then if you see the contribution of immigrants to the US economy, to the US society, and particularly of the Mexican immigrants, then you see the benefits of this immigration. So I think the best way of improve the conversation is to focus on a specific subjects. For example, analyzing the complementarity of the demographic profiles between Mexico and the US for the last years and for the future years to come, because we may be for a surprise. We may be for a surprise in which maybe the US will need more workers and Mexico will not be able to provide them anymore. And second, we have to understand also the complementarity of labor markets. As I said, I just returned from Utah, but every time I have been traveling through the US, and this was before COVID, the trip to Utah was my first since March. And every time I go, the private sector tells me, Ambassador, we need really more workers in the agriculture, in the dairy industry, in manufacturing, as truck drivers, this. And I said, listen, we are willing to work with you to increase the number of H-2A visas, H-2B visas, or find an alternate mechanism of doing training in Mexico for truck drivers and this. But the problem is that then these people will not have the legal path to come and work into the US. So you need to overhaul your immigration laws. You need to talk to your authorities, because we are ready to cooperate on the matter of migration, but you also need to talk to your authorities. But you need to talk even to see this not only as a migration issue, but at this interaction between the two countries. For example, Mexico graduates every year more than 100,000 engineers. And there is a lack of engineers in many places in the US. So you have two options. Maybe bring some engineers to the US with a NAFTA visa, or maybe move some of your operations that required a lot of engineers to Mexico. And that will change also the kind of relationship that we have had for the last years, going more and more into an areas in which North Carolina it's very successful, which is innovation and high technology. And we need to really work hard on those areas of innovation, high technology, electronics, to be able to compete as a region with the rest of the world.
This next question, I have to admit ignorance about, and so I'm going to read it, but it may be tangential or even overlapping with your most recent answer. Jennifer Burge is asking about she says that she's an international business consultant and most of her clients are in Mexico, and would like you to elaborate on the progress of labor reform being implemented for USMCA in Mexico. And at what point will you consider Mexico to be ready to implement the protocols, or do you feel it's already prepared?
I mean, I think we are prepared. I think we are totally prepared. When we passed the labor reform, I mean, we as the government of Mexico passed the labor reform last year. It was the most ambitious labor reform in 70 years in Mexico. And the labor reform has been implemented in Mexico as according to the schedule that it was contemplated. What I would ask is, Jennifer, if you contact also, I will ask my team to send you the recent presentations that the Secretary of Labor made here in Washington to the Wilson Center, specifically on the implementation of the labor reform. And what I would say is we are implementing the labor reform according to schedule. So if we advance on this, I would say we are prepared to comply with what we agreed in the USMCA. But of course, that doesn't mean that there will be no complaints maybe from some people or some unions. They will always be, but we will work on them, just showing that we are implementing the labor reform as agreed in the schedule that we informed about the Congress of the US. But I will send you the presentation.
Great, thank you very much.
I
think our last, go ahead.
No, it's just that I'm asking my team to get the email of Jennifer Berg so that we can send the things. Yes, please.
So let's have a last question. We have a participant who's based in Raleigh and is very impressed with your Mexican consulate in Raleigh. And he wants to know if there is a requirement for Mexican citizens returning to Mexico to visit the consulate team in person during this time.
To visit the consular? No, there is no requirement. It's maybe I didn't understand the question. It's if they are going back to Mexico, do they need to go to the consulate? Is that the question?
Yes, I think so.
I don't think so, unless they need a passport or something. But maybe if Claudia is here, maybe she would say, I mean, the consulates in all the US are working in each state according to the regulations of each state. That means that we are following the social distancing, the masking. Sometimes in some areas, like here in Washington, we are working at home and only in the office at 30% capacity, following the regulations of the District of Columbia. So I would say you have to contact the consulate to see how they are working. If you go to Mexico for holidays, I don't think you need to go through the consulate. If you have your passport ready, if you have all your documents are up to date, but please contact the consulate and see if if you need their assistance for anything else. Here, I see now in the chat that there are the emails and the webpage of the Mexican Embassy, just to have all these, and the Cultural Institute, so that we can have all the contacts for all the follow-up of the education and the labor reform and all the other questions that may arise. And please visit our webpage. We have also some tools for bilingual education, to learn a lot in Spanish. Books, poetry, all these, that now that they're homeschooling, if you have time, go and look these videos, go and look these books, this poetry, and enjoy also everything that the Mexican Cultural Institute does. It has a lot of videos, documentaries, and now we are going to show the altar for the deaf also in a very special presentation, and I'm sure you will enjoy all that. And I hope that we can continue to work with the World Affairs Council of Charlotte. And I hope, and I promise, I will be there in 2021 for the first football match. You know, I have 4 brothers. I'm the eldest of 6, and I have 4 brothers behind me. So when I was a child, I basically played soccer with them all the time. So and I learned from them about soccer, which, you know, it's a passion in Mexico. So it will be my honor to be in the first game, you know, kicking the ball. We used to play in Spanish what we call el que mete gol para. So that what makes the goal, then it becomes, you know, the one who guards the. So it will be my pleasure.
Thank you so very much. And this was just an amazing event, and we really appreciate being with us. We are looking forward to you coming to Charlotte when the conditions improve, and to be at the first soccer game of the Charlotte Football Club. I would also like to say the World Affairs Council is very interested in connecting with schools in Mexico for the embassy,
yes,
where we can connect our schools here in the region directly with schools in Mexico, and we would love to follow up on that with your staff as soon as possible. It's a great way of educating the younger generation about the ties that bind us together, and about our neighbors, and having a more educated and informed future about the 2 countries and the friendship that binds us. Thank you once again. Thank you for everyone being here. And let me turn to our chairman, Wayne Cooper, to close the session.
Great.
Wayne.
Thank you very, very much, LJ. What a fantastic presentation.
Thank you,
Madam Ambassador. It just was so timely, and the questions were great. To our audience, I know we have a lot of people that joined for the first time. And if you're not a member, as LJ says, please become one. And if you are a member, think about upgrading your membership, because this really helps LJ and his wonderful staff to bring programs like we did today. And we also want to thank the Consul General in Raleigh for sponsoring our meeting today. And with that, we'll look forward to it. I think our next is the World Quest event coming up here in a couple weeks. And that, incidentally, for you might not know, that was invented right here with our World Affairs Council in Charlotte, and now has strung all over the United States and been copied. So thank you so very much. And again, thank you, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.